All right, so am I broadcasting? Oh, he did it. Okay, good. It's like, it's still there.
You were just that guy. Is this thing on?
Was, but you know, it's just, it's the intention for everything to go as planned until we get punched in the face.
Right. And as everybody joins, I'm sure they love casual banter among the presenters.
Well, I happen to think that it makes us more real in this time. I sat in on a call about how people are onboarding across different companies, and that's, I guess, just an ongoing and quasi-tired subject among sales enablement practitioners. But it's just it was an interesting on how people are working with ways to try to humanize that experience right now. You know.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate Juliana's on already telling us that she loves casual banter. So anybody who's joining, please make sure when you chat to have all attendee mode so that we're going to have some conversation back and forth. And I'd love everybody to kind of see everybody's responses. So set your chat to all attendees. That'd be awesome. The other thing casual banter does, Bill, is you don't get the same chat that says, is there supposed to be audio? Is this thing working? Am I on? So this is the test, everybody. If you can hear us, your audio is working. Don't panic.
I'd also like to ask a favor of everybody who's already joined. When that one person who turns into 13 people ask if this is being recorded, if you guys just jump in there, just jump right in there and say, yes, Bill and Tim, I got this. It is being recorded. And you're going to get it. You're going to get a second look at it. So there you go.
And yes, the slides will be made available. That's question number 2. Good to see everybody piling in.
Yeah. Carlos, greetings from Virginia. Right back at you, my friend.
Pat, will the slides be available? You're a character, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Oh my gosh. Now everybody's a comic.
Yeah, I tend to have that effect on things, but you know, once we turn the wheel over to you, I think we'll all be engaged and serious and doing a little bit of self-reflection.
That is the goal today. At some point, I'm going to ask people to have a paper and pen to do some old-fashioned note taking. So if you don't have one, you can maybe use these next couple minutes to grab a paper and pen, if they still exist in your house, or however you take notes.
Yes, Pat, you can use a blue pen if such things still exist.
I want everybody to have one of these 4-color doohickeys because my pictures are all contrasting colors. So if you really want to play along.
I don't know if it was the 80s when those pens came out, but like those and calculator watches, and this is the only time that I'm going to date us, Tim, today at least, were like the thing when I was in school. You know, the multicolor pens and the calculator watches that you could like land your own private aircraft on were just absolutely amazing. So I'm going to give it one more minute because we look like we got a few more people joining, then we'll get this thing rolling. Yes, Jeffrey and Sony Walkmans.
Boy, we have a crowd that likes to play along. That I could tell already. And I'm not going to comment on the age of our crowd based on the responses we're getting too. So, because that would mean I understand everything you're saying.
Any insults should go to the 2 people that are on video today. And you know, that's just our privilege. All right, so I'm going to get us started and introduce Tim, and then he's going to take it away for you guys. I'm super excited personally and professionally about this webinar. My name is Bill Ball. I'm a founding member of the Sales Enablement Society. And frankly, Tim and I were talking about this a month or so ago when this idea was dreamed up, and it's funny. Arguably, our relationship and our connection in this space is long overdue. For years now, for those of you guys who are familiar with Corporate Visions, they've been well known in connecting to bridge the gap between sales and marketing and transforming customer conversations, which is funny because that's what a big part of what we do as sales enablement practitioners, you know, and that's part of what ushered in our profession. So as I mentioned, joining me today is Tim Reister. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Corporate Visions. And Tim, you can correct me after I shut my jaw. I think you were the co-author of 4 books, and the most recent being The Expansion Sale. He's going to be sharing with you, I'm going to let him frame this out, but he's going to be sharing with you some science-backed perspectives on remote selling that you can consider for your field or for your practice, or if you're in sales, and hopefully we've got some people on today's webcast that are in sales for your practice right now. If you have not seen Tim speak before, he's highly engaging. He's highly interactive. That's as far as I'm going to raise the bar, Tim, I promise. The reason I mention that is he's going to ask you questions, and there's certainly going to be breaks for you to ask him questions. Please fire them off in the chat. Please fire them off in the question area, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. Hopefully last time I'll say this, otherwise I'm going to leave it to everybody on the webinar. Yes, this is going to be recorded. Yes, you are going to get the slides. Take it away, Tim.
All right. Thanks, Bill. And away we go. All right. The first thing I want everybody to do is to actually participate. I want you to write down 3 numbers. So I ran across this study recently that was sort of blew my mind a little bit, but I think it's analogous, even though it came from the world of poker, it's analogous to what we do in sales and sales enablement. So they analyzed 103 million hands of online poker. So they looked at, that's the beauty of online, they can measure that. And what they discovered is that only 12% of the time did the best hand win. And that's kind of an amazing stat if you think about it. Translate it to your company. We always want to have the best product. We want the next innovation. We want the competitive beater solution that gives us the totally unique selling proposition. But it turns out that I believe it's true in poker that really the skill of the player and in our world, the conversation and story and how it's told makes a difference. Because in poker, it's about some bluffing and some betting and some other techniques. And it turns out you can win more than your fair share of times, whether or not you have the best hand or product or service. So we've spent our entire time looking at this whole world of customer conversations, recognizing that it's the difference maker in a market where most products and services are considered commodities. What's on the lips of your salespeople is the difference maker. So that's where we have spent our time. But what happened when all those people who went into sales to razzle and dazzle in the room, right, Bill? They all went into sales because they're like, this is where I do my best work. If we want to go back to like 90s references, Jerry Maguire, in the living room, this is where I do my best work. Well, the problem is we aren't in the room anymore. We're not in the room where it happens. I just updated my reference. We don't razzle. Now we're like a freaking mime. We're in a box right up there in the corner, like a postage stamp, right? You are here. And so now that the conversation's still the driver of differentiation, we recognize that about 90% of the real estate in a moment like this is given over to what used to be the backdrop. And now we're taking second fiddle to the presentation. We've done some research recently, and what we found out is that 83.6% of sellers say, we totally rely on PowerPoint in this moment. And what they realize is they're not sure it's ready for prime time. So sellers, 70% told us they do not believe that this environment can be as effective. So I told you that on the little promo video. And so what we really want to talk about today is there's really two things that probably have to change. The presentation needs to change. And by that, I mean both the presentation deck and the presentation of that, the presenter and the presentation. 90% of sellers tell us they know it needs to be different. 75% of sellers say, I'm still doing the same stinking thing I've been doing, but I just now do it on a web conference. So I'm not here to talk about turn your camera on, point your lights in the right direction, don't put the camera up your nose. I want to talk about that big moment. What happens with the real estate you now have in front of you to distinguish you when everyone is in a little box and everyone's using a PowerPoint deck? What can be the difference? So Bill mentioned we use science. And so one of the main things that's really important to understand about this moment is that perhaps the most important science you want to impact is people's memory, because a presentation happens at a point in time and a decision happens at another point in time later on over some duration. And the question is, you want them to remember you most and most favorably when it comes time for the decision. And there's clearly deterioration and degradation of memory that goes on, but it's not just the ability in terms of how much to remember, it's the kind of memory. So I get a little geeky on this stuff, but I want to teach you about precision versus gist memory. So when you heard of, I get the gist of it. What you want in this when you move to the decision moment is you want precision memory at this point, because that means they're remembering you and they're remembering you differently and you specifically among the rest. Gist memory means they kind of got the gist, and typically gist is something that they then ascribe to basically everybody they talk to. So the gist of it, when we think of all these competitors we looked at, is this. No, you want it to be, the gist of it is this, but this company did and said this. So precision memory, how can you impact somebody's memory when literally after they turn this off, they're going to go back to their email, they're going to listen to other vendors. How do you stick in their memory? And things are different in this environment. So what do? We study the decision-making sciences. We are big fans of what we call decision science. Decision science is what the three forms of science you see in front of you: behavioral economics, cognitive neuroscience, and social psychology. In other words, how people frame value and make choices, how group dynamics play a role in that, and literally the functionality and physiology involved. And we triangulate that and do our own real world testing in simulations, field trials, and even in the room with helmets and eye trackers, which have become very important right now when it comes to this environment. We don't do this alone. We have our own double PhD cognitive neuroscientist, Carmen Simon, on our staff as the chief science officer. In the States, we also work with Zach Tormala from Stanford. And in EMEA, we work with Nick Lee from Warwick Business School outside of London. So what you're going to hear today is all rooted in science, the science of human decision-making, and now more specifically, the science of visual storytelling. And this is fresh, original, and exclusive stuff that you're going to hear. We're excited to bring it to you. So what you're going to hear from me the rest of the way is how to deliver more memorable virtual presentations, because, as we just established, precision memory is the goal. So I want you to recall that precision memory is the goal, and now how can you be more memorable with science-backed ideas? We have three big ideas for you, but before I go any further, Bill, anything jump out at you there that you want to comment on, or anybody had any comments I should be aware of yet at this point?
So everybody, as I suspected, said, hey, Tim, what platform, what technology are you using? You probably get this every single time, right, for this whiteboard prezo. So let's start with that really quickly, just to,
So everybody's not distracted by that the whole time, right? I do want you to understand why and how to do it, because it's going to be an important lesson later. This is just sort of one of those, like, you're living in the matrix. I'm going to tell you to do something that I'm doing to you. So my annotation is very simple and basic, because if it's hard, nobody will do it. It does require a touch screen. So my simple Lenovo ThinkPad, the latest version, has a touch screen with a built-in stylus. I have my PowerPoint pulled up. I simply go over to a little tray over here and I can click on a different color and I can engage with, I am drawing on the top of my slides in slide view, full screen view on a Lenovo touchscreen laptop. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less, and you can accomplish everything you're seeing here. So now that we have that, Bill, anything else?
So Elena asked, what's the standard of a normal memory? I think I understand that question directly. Does that make sense to you?
A standard of a normal memory in the context of how much they remember?
Perhaps that's what Elena's asking. Otherwise, I think she'll clarify.
Well, no, I'm going to clarify because I'm assuming that's what she's asking because it's the very next thing I'm going to talk about. So, Bill, I'm going to use that as the transition. I'll come back to you. We have 3 sections here, and after each section, we'll pause and have a dialogue about it. But literally, thank you. I think you said it was Elena. The first lesson that we have to learn here is the idea of how to clarify your 10%. And so here's what we've been showing, because we've been doing studies recently with people where they see it one day, and then we come back 2 days later to measure what they remember, how much you remember, and how much of it is precise versus how much of it is gist. And in totality, people will forget 90% of what you say. In fact, because I'm a believer in contrast and the value of contrast, people will forget 90% of what you present literally within 2 days. So we are humbled by the fact that as brilliant as we are, and even as much as I want you to remember 90% of what I'm going to tell you, 10% is probably what I'm going to get. And in fact, in our recent studies, that can range from like 3%, be able to recall the big points, to 12%. So we're going to round it to 10%, because it's an easy number for people to remember. And it makes for a good bumper sticker here when I tell you, you got to remember your audiences only remember 10%. So you need to clarify what your 10% is, because memory is random. So that's the problem. Not only is a gist memory a problem, memory is random. So the key is you want them to remember a certain 10%. There's something in your story that you want to make sure they take home with them, because a lot of what's in your story is there because it has to be, but there's definitely the precise thing you want them to remember, your 10%, that they take away that is distinctive to you and is important to them. So the key is knowing your 10%. Spoiler alert, the next thing I'm going to talk about is how you control your 10%. But the first thing is knowing, isolating it, and repeating it. So I would ask you, a typical deck here, I don't think it's atypical. I don't think I made it particularly butt ugly here either. It's kind of typical. What's the most important message? Where's the 10%? What are people going to remember? It's going to be random. It's going to be potentially the thing you didn't want them to remember, that you didn't think was most important, but where you were obligated to talk about. And it gets worse as we get more complicated and our presentations get longer, because now we're talking about finals presentations and things being online. So this can get rather ugly. So first tool I want to give you is replace the concept of an agenda slide with the idea of a 10% slide. And what I want you to do is think agenda /10%. And that the idea is you have a big 10% idea with 3 supporting points that reinforce the big idea and distinguish your ability to solve the problem versus everyone else. So this opportunity is to think of your agenda as driving your 10%, is because you get to keep your agenda coming back up throughout the presentation, because you can kind of do, as I'll show you, a you are here moment. And if you use this to talk about your big 10%, it gives you a chance to keep bringing it back into the presentation without it feeling like super creepy redundant. And so again, replace agenda with the 10%, your big message, and 3 supporting points. And then think about how then you simply distinguish it in your deck. It becomes the different slide. It's the one that looks different. It stands out every time it shows up. And it's a big idea supported with 3 points. And you can then use that like a slate or a you are here moment to bring everybody back to 10%, and then tell the next big point in support of it. And the idea is to make it look different than the rest of the slides, so it sears into people's brains. The question I know I'm going to get, Bill, from everybody is, how do you find your 10%? So if you have a piece of paper, I want you to take this little lesson down. Your 10% lives in an area we call the value wedge. And the thing about the value wedge that's really important here is that as a consultant, I need to have a Venn diagram in my presentation. It's actually a law. I'm just kidding. So the idea is that I want you to write the customer in this box, you, and then your competitor. The thing about most presentations, and often the struggle for most people, is, and in a Venn diagram, like this is the best place to be. It's always a sweet spot. But what I would tell you is this is the parity trap. This is too much of what we're saying in our presentation is the same as everybody else. And then what they think of is, on the whole, what they think of is they were all more or less the same. What I'm asking you to do is find your value wedge. And what is the value wedge? The value wedge essentially answers 3 questions. Your value wedge is your 10% because it's important to the customer, very important to the customer. It's unique to you, and it's defensible from a competitive standpoint. So important to the customer, unique to you, and defensible as a different story. And that's your value wedge. Remember, it's a wedge. You want a wedge, not the whole pie. And that's the part you want to repeat. And voila, there's your 10%, because I'm going to tell you that we overrate how different and unique our solution is. So you find that is, you make that the meta message and the 3 supporting points. And then what they get to is, on the whole, they remember precisely what distinguished you, all things else considered equal. So look for your value wedge, and that becomes your 10%. And then your slide build, your repeatable 10% slide, is always main message, 3 supporting points. And what that does is allow you to break up your presentation with a stark slide that looks distinctly different from the rest and constantly reinforces your main message, your 10%, and the 3 main things you do distinct or different to help get them there. They could be simple, like buttons. They could be really basic. Imagine a presentation that's filled with all kinds of charts and everything else, and you got to your agenda slide, and it was simply a white background with some text. Why am I telling you this? I don't want you to think you have to become an artist, a design graphics expert. Really, you need to have a different slide with a main message and your 3 core ones, and repeat that throughout. And you find your 10% in the value wedge, and then you literally repeat your 10% throughout. You reset the 10% as you go to each of the important sections. And over the course of 20 to 30 minutes, you should be repeating your 10% slide at a minimum 5 to 6 times, we've discovered. And using your 10% message potentially even more. As you describe some things in here, you should bring back your key phrase like precision memory. But you have a chance now to drive home your 10% in a purposeful, meaningful way that doesn't feel redundant and continually stands out and reinforces the precise memory you want them to have. So I'm going to pause here. The first job is to make sure, as I said, the presentation and the presenter need to be different. Your presentation needs to find and clarify and repeat your 10% message. Bill, over to you with any questions that people might have and any you might have.
Some observations. Amy commented that she's done this in L&D before, so probably delivering something to in a workshop format. And other people are chiming in and saying, hey, I recognize this and it works well. The question I have for you, Tim, goes back to your Venn diagram, because you're right, no experience like this wouldn't be complete without it. What's the difference? I imagine a lot of people, a lot of practitioners, a lot of sales leaders are trying to pull their company's messaging away from product-centric messaging to how we help with our customers' business challenges and how we impact the customer messaging. Based on what I'm seeing here, I'm wondering if you're saying, or if I'm interpreting you correctly, how we help against our customers' challenges is actually in that red bucket that's the parity, potentially.
No, so there are lots of challenges where how you help them is at parity, right? Because this basically says it's important to sorry, I wanted to change colors for us there just to give us a little contrast. Oh, Wow, Tim. The idea here is that in the value wedge, I'll get this right. You, in the middle here, you are answering the question, what's important to the customer, and you do it and your competitor does it. So the problem is, it's not that you're not answering what's important to the customer. You're talking about something that everybody else does and does almost as well as you. That's what that moment is here. So let's just call this the parity wedge as opposed to the value wedge, which is important to the customer. Yes. And it's this thing you're distinctly important to, that you want to set apart and you want them to prioritize, and you want them to see as like the thing they should have at the top of their checklist. And you do it unique or advantaged, and you can defend it. It's out here. It's not the same or going to look like the same as your competitor. Did that answer that question?
I think so. And I've got another one here for you, a couple actually. It's interesting with probably clients of yours and other people on the call that are in industries that are a little bit more commoditized. This might be a great way or a great exercise for them to come up with that whole, why are we unique? Why are we different? Because that's a massive challenge for a lot of companies, that where there's a ton of other companies that, you know, the resources needed, but a lot of other people do the exact same thing. So being able to put that package together of like how you impact your customer, and then scrape away those things that are a little different in that brain, and rather than starting with, you know, how am I unique? I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at or not.
What I'm getting at is, you want to make it contextual. You don't want to say, here's how I'm unique. You want that 10% side to basically say, here's the most important thing you need to consider. All things considered equal, this is what you need to prioritize. This is the underappreciated challenges and solutions that you need to address to achieve this meta message. The good news is, people only remember 10%. I know people worry like, we don't have enough that's different about us. You ought to be able to find 10%. That's all I'm asking for. And then make that the hero of the story, because, and again, it leads with the customer need, no doubt. But what you're then talking about are the challenges and threats you solve for distinctly. So good. I'm not going to have to press on to get through the time here. I love the interaction, but we got two more big ideas here. Bill, hold some of those and check on them. And here's the other thing I promise. We'll put a Google Doc together, and I'll answer all these questions, and we can send that with the slides and the recording. So everybody who wants to know if your question will get answered, yes, and you'll have slides and recording. All right, so number 2 is controlling focus. So you have your 10%, and repeating it is one tool to control focus. But what you need to know is, even that, just having a slide pop up from time to time to control people's focus because it reinforces your 10% isn't enough. Here's the deal. Too many presentations that I see, think about your own, give away the story right away. Everything shows up on the slide. So this is some eye tracking. So imagine I'm trying to tell you a story about digital transformation, and I want to tell you about my 3 most important points. And I'm here, and now you talk there for a couple minutes, and where is everybody's eyes? It's here. That's not good news, because they're reading ahead from where you are, and people read faster than you talk, and they've drawn their own conclusions already. They've summarized what you're going to say before you say it, and it might be wrong. It might not be what you had to say, and they might miss your most important, clever point, because they're consumed with reading it and getting done and saying, I know what's going to be said here. For the love of anything, I have no idea why people don't simply use build and animation. If you don't do anything different after this, I know exactly where you're looking, and you're not looking ahead, you're not reading ahead, and I am giving you tools to control people's focus. We are in an environment where they're going to do what they want to do. You want to help them do what you need them to do. So build an animation, big idea. How many of you have slides that look like this? Eventually you got to tell a complicated story, but where is everybody looking right now? I can know precisely where you're looking. I can control your focus, keep it exactly where I want it to be, just by adding a build or animation function. Again, I'm trying to give you tips, gang, because I don't want you to have to go to an agency or an art director to do this stuff. I want you to be able to use basic build and animation functionality. Chunk. People also learn better when things are chunked, because they don't get paralyzed by too much information. and have this thing animate exactly as you tell the story so that people can see the story reveal and unfold as they can consume and absorb it, and they understand how it all comes together. Do not do slides with bullets that are already all revealed, and do not do images that are fully revealed ever again if you want to control people's focus. Now, if you're maybe not into build and animation, you could use color. Here's another picture, not unlike some of your companies. Maybe you can start then by saying, now here's where we're going to go. We're going to talk about this. And then as you move on, something else colors. Like grayscale, gray tone is your friend. It means this is not important right now. Pay attention to this part. I know exactly where you're looking. I am controlling your focus. So you are hearing exactly what I want you to hear at this moment, no more, no less. Another control your focus moment is what I've been trying to do here, right? I've been annotating, and some of you have already picked up on that. And I talked about how 80+% of it's PowerPoint and 70% of sellers don't think they can be as effective. Annotation, another way to control focus. I am giving you information. You're now beginning to expect you're going to get more information than's on the slide. And I'm also at the same time directing your gaze to the thing I want to point out. Here's another way to use this. This is really important, I think, in any sales call. You want to have an interaction and a dialogue. And if there are a couple people on this call, I will ask them some things like I was asking Bill, and I'll take notes. Oh, what kind of technology are you using to draw? And okay, that's a good point. Let me capture that. Let's have a dialogue. And as other things come up, imagine how important it is to creating engagement, that you get them to engage and tell you something, but they actually get to see with their own eyes that you are capturing it, you are understanding it, you're getting it right. And they could be like, oh, that's not exactly, Tim, what I was saying, what I really meant to say here. And you're like, okay, got it, no problem. Let me capture that accurately because I don't want to go back and misrepresent. And they can literally now start the dialogue to engage with you because they're seeing it before their own eyes. And this would have been like you were doing in the room, maybe with an easel pad or a whiteboard, you were gathering notes. I think even better than doing it on a legal pad, because now the client can engage with it, see what you're capturing, and see, frankly, how smart you are, and maybe not only capturing it, but actually taking a smarter note than even the dialogue represented. So a huge opportunity. One more idea, you're seeing it, and then I'll break on controlling focus, but controlling focus with animation and build, controlling focus with color. You can do it with size of things too. I didn't even talk about that. Annotation, drawing to control focus, but even whiteboarding. Here's an opportunity for everybody that I think needs to be considered. When we did our research and found out that 83.6% of salespeople rely on PowerPoint, we found that a measly 3.2% said they do any kind of whiteboarding. So if you and your team want to differentiate themselves in a very undifferentiated environment, if you want to get people to lean into like, what the heck is going to happen next, give them a whiteboard, a simple concrete image like I did earlier, and we could have a very productive conversation. And you've got people leaning in and taking notes themselves. Like, that's a powerful opportunity. If you don't remember, I was asking you to grab a pen and a paper and grab some of this stuff. There's a chance to distinguish yourself from 96% of all other sellers by doing something for a brief moment other than a PowerPoint. The one thing about PowerPoint is it creates something called habituation. People start to, they get, I'm going to break ranks here for a second. Your templates suck because they habituate people. They know exactly what's going to be on the page. They know exactly where it's going to go. And you think that's helpful to organize thoughts and things like that. But the truth of the matter is, one, your template's too busy. You got too much branding on there. Two, it habituates. Everybody knows kind of what the next slide's going to be. Oh, there's going to be bullets and stock photography. Whoop-de-doo. So there's got to be a moment that changes the game and recaptures and spikes people's attention and gets them back in there. And the tips and tricks I'm giving you here are extremely important for that. So here's what I want to do with a little bit of chat. I want you to go to your chat, and I want you to write in the chat box. I'm going to open it up so I can see and comment on it. Hopefully I won't see anything that anybody said about me. Which of these do you think, like right now, tomorrow, would be the most easiest to do and most impactful, or, just, the most usable for you that you think would make a difference based on what you saw me do? Imagine yourself doing it. A lot of whiteboarding, annotations, animations. Again, this is a very powerful participative crowd. Annotating, lot of like unique stuff, annotating and whiteboarding. That's like 201 level stuff, gang. So I think that's real differentiated there. But I think some of you are acknowledging this idea that animation and color, that's a huge leap. That's like going from a 0 to a 5. Annotations going like from 5 to 7, or whiteboarding is going from like 5 to 10, but maybe we're at 0 and some animation, some builds. Absolutely. If you don't take anything else away, find your 10% slide and repeat it, and take every one of your slides that have everything showing already and turn them into animations and builds. The thing you need to know, and that's going to segue me into my next point, Bill. So do you have any questions or comments? Audience participation. Yeah, spoiler alert, using chat in a moment like this is a good way to control focus or get people back in there. I'm curious how some of these tips and strategies be adapted to an environment where you have only 5 to 10 minutes in a deck. I would say that in a 5 to 10 minute deck, you still got to have your 10%, and you got to repeat that at least 2 to 3 times in there. I'd argue 3 times, because it's a fleeting moment. So you're going to want to make sure there's enough repetition in there. But I would also tell you, and I'm about to give away where I'm headed next, there's something called the stimulation threshold. And I've already stayed on this slide too long, so I've got to actually move on, Bill, because I'm like defeating my own. Thank you for everybody's participation. You have to have enough movement. So again, I'm going to talk about that in the next idea here called priming the brain. Bill, did you have any other questions about controlling focus?
I just think it's interesting, right? Well, I do see one in the chat. Jay is asking, what are you doing around best practices for PowerPoint follow-up? That's interesting. Do you pick up what he's putting down there?
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see if you can see this. So I'm going to do something at risk. I'm going to hit escape. Did that pop up? Can you see want to keep ink annotations? I hit keep, and I will do that later. And you guys, okay, I just should keep it. That could do damage. So I hit keep, and I'm going to do it at the end again, because then you will get a PDF. Because I'll be honest, these slides with all this stuff in it are pretty big. So I PDF, so then they see the complete picture, yes, but they will also see your notes if you're an annotator. And in my blank slides that were once blank, you will now see the images that I drew and the notes that I took. I faked the notes today, but if you have real notes in there, I do this all the time. I package that up and I send that off. So when you say, send your slides, sometimes people look at the slides and like, oh my gosh, it seemed brilliant at the time, but I don't remember what that means. Now, if you've got some annotation and some notes and some whiteboards, it all comes back to them. So PDF and keeping your annotations is the answer I would give for that one. As you will see when you get it.
We're really getting into the weeds, Tim, which I think is exciting.
That means people care.
It does. It absolutely does. I couldn't even read the comments when you asked your last question. Christina asked, how to build show up in a PDF? Do you have to be careful with this?
So it's the thing you're going to assume in the PDF is one of 2 things. And I've got 2 ways that I do this. If the audience that is going to consume this was primarily in the meeting, the build show up as a completed slide. Part of the build process is you want to control people's focus when you're talking so that they get your message at the right time with the right support. Once you give it to them as notes, it's okay, I believe, that it's now a completed slide and they've got your notations on there and things like that. So the other thing is, if that's a problem, what I've done is I've actually created separate slides. So I take the build and it's slide 1, image 1, slide 2, the second thing shows up. So when you PDF it, they will see separate slides with each element being added to it. So it really depends on what you're thinking the use is going to be. My belief is controlling focus is the most important when you are delivering, and that your animations and builds can be there. And so when they go back, it's okay for them to see all the bullet points up and they can see the architecture. So you got 2 ways to go about that.
That's great. It's interesting, right? Obviously this gets back to science, right? And if you'd asked them at the beginning of this deck, if you said, "Hey, I'd like you to tell me about the challenges that my company can help you with the most, and I'm going to draw as you talk." Like, I don't see how that would go, but that's exactly what's happening, right? And then when they get so people are asking, "Hey, should you put the deck on a diet? Should you, change it or whatever else?" It's their notes.
Right.
If you've gotten them to supply the information, basically you were the treasurer in the meeting, right? And you brought their words and their ideas to life. So they should be coming over that thing.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to put your deck on a diet if you play your 10% right when you're online like this, because again, because we're having this much conversation, my slides aren't moving, but we're going to talk about something next here called the stimulation threshold. And the expectation is that people are watching a lot of screens now, and they have an expectation for the level of stimulation. And now they're seeing your presentation. And the question is, can you keep their attention? And so what we know is you need almost 3 to 5 times the amount of movement or motion. And that can be accomplished with builds, that can be accomplished with more slides, that can be accomplished with annotation and things I'm doing to try and keep it moving. But the modern audience, it's called the stimulation threshold, it's not dirty, is that you just keep them engaged. And it's in some of the techniques that I've been teaching you are important. But there's like a moment where you like need them to absolutely focus. And I'm going to teach you a couple techniques now for the concept that we call priming. You want to prime the brain with a highly intense sort of experience. So that's where this goes, Bill. So there's a lot of questions. So I heard your deck on a diet, not necessarily. We're in this experience. You need to have the motion and the movement and the content. If and you're providing them the notes and the content afterward, you feel like there might have been a few superfluous slides that detracted from your 10%, you might want to pull a few of those out. But I recently had somebody who said, we're going to have a 20-minute meeting, so keep it to 10 slides or less. And I'm like, what? How can you simply say that? Where does that even come from? There's like no science about that. And in fact, on a virtual presentation like that is the exact wrong thing to keep people's attention. So no, you can't spec the number of slides. In fact, you're not even going to know how many slides I have because you're going to be engaged. And the truth is, in that 20 minutes, I'm going to have 32 slides. And so in the PDF, I might have sent them 10, but that's a different story. So anyways, I hope that answers some folks' questions.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, we had 20 minutes and I only got the one section here. So yeah, let's take a question.
So I won't fault you, Tim, if you have to pull I have a chief science officer, card that I've got to call that person on this one. So Amy asked, can you point to research on stimulation threshold? That's a question. This goes against, so I'm assuming she means this, what you're talking about, goes against research like split attention, but what we are dealing with is so new, the research is ever evolving for sure. So it sounds like a question and a comment there.
Right. And so I had the same question when somebody said, I didn't think I was supposed to have so many animations and it distracts and it does this and there's some of the things are at odds. So I do not have handy with me right now stimulation threshold content. And so Bill, let's take that offline. I will get that from Carmen. And the idea of like how much motion and movement is needed to overcome the stimulation threshold. I am quoting her when I talk about the 3 to 5x versus a typical in-person presentation. So great points. Here's what I would say is without your 10% and without tools to control their focus, then can I swear here a little bit? Then it could be a shit show. You're right. This is in the hands of people who are controlling their 10% and controlling people's focus. My point is they're seeing the kind of movement they need to stay engaged. And some of it is actually the activity of controlling their focus. It's just more movement to keep them engaged because this is the thing here. They are in a multitasking environment. And the moment they think there's nothing else important on the screen, they've seen it all, is the moment they look at their phone for an email. So you need to keep them thinking there's something else that could pop up on this picture that could be important to them and to their survival. So you're keeping that that old brain, the amygdala, like engaged, like, whoa, there's something here I might need to pay attention to, because that could be the important thing. Don't want to miss that. So I think the lessons underneath this are what's really important to make sure it's managed motion and animation, and smartly controlled.
Great.
So let's press on to priming, some examples of priming. So I kind of, spoiler alert, chat is a great way to prime people, because now they are the highly intense moment for you to have to answer, for you to have to say something, for you to have to comment on something. And so I think in sales meetings, using chat, oh, hey, Kathy, you want to know about my writing tool? See, Bill, I had this all set up to talk about it here, but you blew it up front. But so the idea of having the chat turned on and being engaging with the chat like we're trying to do here is a priming tool. It keeps the stimulation up. So, so not all of this is about how many slides are moving. It really is about an intense stimulus that causes people to refocus on the discussion at hand. I love chat. It's a great tool, but here's another thing that I'm serious you need to consider for your sellers, and that is to take some of their important assessment questions and their important diagnostic questions and turn them into polls. Here's why. Polls are important because they're anonymous. What happens in a conversation is, here you are, and you're trying to get all these decision makers to line up. You're trying to build consensus. But there's somebody in the room who is the senior person in the room, and everybody defers to them. And maybe they know their strong opinions and they hold back their own opinions, and you don't get the full truth. But yet these other deciders or influencers after the meeting might blow some stuff up. And so what you get to do with a poll is ask a question, and everybody gives you an honest answer, and you start to go, wow, looks like we need a little consensus building here. And you can start to begin to manage that consensus building and start asking certain questions in addition and start giving certain answers, because you can see where the team's at. It's fragmented. That's not good for your deal. This is something you can't do when you're in the room, because everybody's a chicken. They don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to say anything. Polls give you anonymity. And I would say, I like the chat function on large crowds like this. You know, we had 600 some people register for this, because a lot of people are seeing each other and they're catching the energy and feeling the vibe, and you can call out a few names. That's pretty cool. But if I was in a room where I'm asking sort of a delicate consensus building assessment question, and I want to know where the team's at, I would consider a poll. So as an enablement person, you might want to pre-build a couple polls so they can use it in this environment and figure out which diagnostic questions. So I've told, you know, in fact, I'll do it in the chat right now. Based on what you're seeing here, on a scale of 1 to 5, how ready do you feel your sellers are to be advanced remote presenters like you're seeing today? 1, no chance. We are at the bottom of the barrel. 5, thanks, Tim, we got this licked. Now, again, I'm going to do it here because so we got some 2s and 3s, some pretty confident people. So good. We have a 4. All right. That person gets to present next week. 1s and 2s. Yeah. So, you know, here's the question, gang, is that, and some of these were meant to be simple. Like some of you are probably using builds and animations, and maybe you got some good agenda slides, but I'm guessing maybe you're going to take away annotation and whiteboard, like next level stuff. So that's awesome. Now let's imagine we were in your company and somebody was in charge of this, and you had to give an answer, and you didn't want to say it was a 1 because you just didn't feel that was good, a career move. You could do it anonymously in a poll. So anyways, that's an important tool. But I really want to get to this next one because it's an exclusive study we did, that if you're looking for the thing to move you possibly from a 3 to a 4 or 4 to a 5, I want you to consider this. And we've been doing some of this as we've been going along today. Grab your paper again, gang. Grab your paper and your pen, whatever pen it is, whoever that was, Pat, I think it was, and draw 3 boxes for me. And I want these boxes to be side by side, and I want them to be in ascending order, right? Going up and to the right. Draw those 3 boxes. Now, what I want you to do in the first box is write the words watch only. We did an interesting study. because a lot of remote selling was over the phone initially. I mean, in the day, right? It was, I'm just going to talk on the phone. I'm not going to put this slideware up, because honestly, the slide presentation was usually held back for a lot of face-to-face things. So we wanted to test this. So we built a message, a persuasive message, and we recorded it. And we used, in this case, there was a cohort or a group that, I'm sorry, gang, I've done this so often. I need you to write, I hope you did it in pencil. It's listen only. This first box is listen only, because we wanted to emulate the idea of a phone call. So you were hearing the presentation, the persuasive pitch, just by listening to it. In the next one, put watch visuals. So we took that same talk track, the same audio, and we put a video of PowerPoint slides moving on top of the talk track. So group number 2 heard this story as a watch and listen. And hopefully today we've given you some tips and tricks to make your visuals more impactful. This is a piece of science called the picture superiority effect. And what it says is people will remember more of your big idea if there's a visual to reinforce it and support it. But now what I want you to do in the last box is write down the words draw along. And then next to that box, I want you to put a big arrow up and then write the number 14, the number 12, and the number 10. So we did a study then where there was a third cohort. They were listening to the pitch, they were watching the slides moved, but at the beginning they said, take out a piece of paper and a pen and capture this as you hear it. And after we were done with all 3 groups, right? So they only listened or watched and listened, or drew along, watched and listened, like they only did their own thing. 14%. So we asked them a series of questions, and a bunch of the questions were about how different and how unique was this? How different was this from other pitches you see? How unique was this presentation? How beneficial do you think this was? So we ask a whole bunch of questions around being different and unique. Well, what's important about this environment is be different, be unique, because everyone looks the same. We saw an increase of 14%. So everybody on a scale of 1 to 10 on all those questions rated it. And what we saw is the people who were asked to draw along, in addition to watching and listening, rated their experience as 14% higher in terms of being different and unique. Very important. 12% found it more memorable. So they were able to retell the story 2 days later at a 12% higher accuracy rate than those who watched and listened, and then better than the ones who listened only. So a 12% increase in their ability to remember and retell the story, which is a huge goal, because we talked about memory being important. And then 10%, when we ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how convinced are you that you have this business problem, and how convinced are you that this supplier has a solution? The people who drew along scored, their scores were 10% higher than the rest. So this idea is adding a little friction to the processing of your message. People are always like, it's got to be friction free. It's got to be frictionless. We like panic if we introduce too much friction. And it turns out that friction may actually be a net positive, as this study shows, because when my presentation's over and you go back to your work, what are you going to remember? How are you going to remember? And now look down at that piece of paper. Hopefully you didn't screw up that first box too much, my fault. Now remember, look at that piece of paper, and I bet you can tell a very complicated study to the next person days afterward. This will walk the halls. You can't unsee it. You can't unhear it now, just because you drew a couple boxes, wrote a couple words, and put a couple numbers in. So just a few squiggly lines that you had your audience capture make something very memorable. In fact, I'm going to give you this example. We were working with a company that was selling fireplaces. So they were working with salespeople at new home builders, trying to convince the new home buyer to put a fireplace in. And they wanted to have people put more fireplaces in. They were averaging 5 out of 10 homes were putting a fireplace in. And what they were averaging is that the majority of them, so 96% of them, were putting in just a standard fireplace, nothing premium. So they wanted to increase the penetration rate and the upsell rate. And they simply did this. They taught the salesperson to ask the home buyer to write down 3 numbers in their notes as they were having their meeting: 1, 710, and 4. And they said, these numbers tell a story. The number 1 is fireplaces have been voted consistently over the last 20 years as the number 1 indoor feature that people who buy homes, so eventually you might want to sell your home, they look for. The number 1 indoor feature. In fact, 710 is really 7 out of 10 say it's a must-have, and actually 9 out of 10 say it's a nice to have. So the concern is, if you don't have a fireplace, you don't have the number 1 indoor feature, and you reduce your sellable audience, addressable audience, to just 3 out of 10. Number 4 here is only 4% of people put a premium fireplace in. So at some point when you're in a competitive home buying and selling situation, if you want to distinguish yourself from basically the entire market, you might want to consider an upgrade. And scene. That was it. They had the person draw along. Guess what happened with this one pilot test home builder group that they had the salespeople use it? They increased their penetration rate to 7 out of 10 homes had fireplaces, and fully 40% were now buying premium. So that was an increase of 40% penetration rate and 400% wallet share, right? And the only thing that changed was this little number story, a little 10% story that they then had the homeowner draw along with. Awesome opportunity, again, to think about when the screen goes dark and they go back to work, what really are they going to remember? And what I know right now, Bill, is there's a percentage of people, even those in Florida, who are like, I should have a fireplace. It's like you can't unsee it, right? Like you literally now can't probably stop thinking about whether or not your home is going to be valued by potential buyers at the level it needs to be, if it does or doesn't have a fireplace, or a premium one at that. So I'm going to ask this question, then we can take some questions in the chat box. Friction, priming the brain by getting people to participate and draw along. Green, yellow, red. Where are you on this? Green, yeah, we should do this all day long. Yellow, I think we could give it a try. Red, are you freaking kidding me? Look at that, the brave souls. Bright green, I love it. And yeah, we again a very, very aggressive, proactive crowd here. Totes green. You sound like my daughters, Mark. Sorry. So awesome. Think about it now, where ultimately, maybe there's something in your 10% message. There's a simple way to reinforce or drive home your 10% message. Let me give you an idea. Maybe in your 10% message, what you want to do is you want to take them to the end. And at the end of your 10% message, you want to just do a couple numbers. And those numbers, I'm going to make up some numbers right now, 9, 10, and 50. They tell a customer proof point story. You get to the end and say, could you write these numbers down? Basically this happened, it was 9%, and this meant $10 million. I always like when they're not exactly all percentages. $10 million worth of cost unnecessarily. And when they got done working with us, they had a 50% increase in the recovered costs that they had been leaking. And you tell a quick customer story, and that now sticks with them, and they remember that story, and they now own it because they drew it along. Many options for you to consider to take on this idea, but priming the brain, overcoming the stimulation threshold by re-engaging people in a way that's adding a little bit of friction. That's the priming. It's an intense stimulus before you really want to make an important point. So the tools I showed you precipitate or were, in order for me to make a really important point, I wanted you now super engaged or re-engaged. So I'm going to pause there and refresh you on my 10%. I hope everybody noticed that my 10% slide was distinct from the other slides, the only one with the dark background, and the three messages continually repeated, and the idea of precision and memorability repeated throughout. But here's the three big ideas. Let me, with the few minutes that we have left here, Bill, throw it back to you.
So a couple of quick things. If you could just jump to the last, I have a couple of quick announcements, and then I want to throw all the questions out that we can possibly.
I want people to take a picture of this, Bill, because we're giving them a free toolkit, infographic, ebook, and details on how your teams could benefit from this. So take a shot of that. We're going to send it out too, but I'll go to your closing slide. America,
land of free gift with purchase, right? It wouldn't be any other way. A couple of quick things for everybody. One, our virtual conference, it finally has a date, and you may see Tim there. So we'll just see about that. If you want to see Tim again, we are still looking for additional presenters, practitioners, and sponsors. So the link at the bottom of the slide is where you need to go, but you can go to secociety.org and find all that stuff as well. So let's go back to questions. So in the awesome exercise of green, yellow, red that we just did, a lot of great questions got buried. One question that I saw come up a lot, Tim, it's a simple question, but I think it's an important one. Is there a group size, Kirk asked this, a few other people asked this, is there a group size minimum to utilize polls effectively and safely?
So I have never tested it. So one of the things is when you do the science and the research like we do, if we don't have actual data to support it, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just giving an opinion. And the world is already full of too much anecdata. So I don't have a magic number. I think it's one of those things where, if you have anything from like 1 to 5, you might want to use a number there in terms of the range and the choices based on potentially the number of the people in the room. I think it's more a function of, is there a feel of enough people in the room and the knowledge that maybe somebody might dominate that this is important. But I think of, I'm gonna say that I would go out on a limb and say you probably have to have at least as many people in the room as you do on the scale to make it not feel weird. That's that, and make it feel like it's worth polling because it's hard to get everybody to talk, right? If only 2 or 3 people are there, you might as well just try and smoke them out.
This question has some flags in it. And so I'm trying to prime you, Tim. How do you prime people who are more auditory than visual? Vincent asked that. So how do you prime people who are more auditory than visual?
Well, certainly I spend a lot of time on inflection and other things in my voice, but I will tell you that in this environment, and this would be great if Carmen was here to answer it, she says that much of the science of the importance of things like auditory and body movement is all out the window here, that it's all about visual, and that in reality, most of our learning is visual. Even if we think we're auditory, 92% of the information we consume and effectively can regurgitate is what we see. So if there's audio dominated, I do think it's important to practice so that inflection and tone and emphasis, frankly, dramatic pause or other types of engagement are there and important. And really the idea of when you have the animations is it should be, your voice and tone should be affected like a good comedian. Like, I'm now going to bring you the pièce de résistance, click. And now you felt that build up, right? So, but I would say that's like to give you a differentiating technique that you need. I believe that most everybody, through all the work that Carmen, who is the neuroscientist, says that the majority of people are visual learners. So what you want to do is just lean into the majority.
Yeah, I'm not trying to start the whole learning style debate thing, because I think we've got, that's a touch point maybe for another time over probably beers, but versus an environment like this, it might be a little bit more entertaining. But I love that answer. We've still got about 160 people with us. A lot of great comments, a lot of great presentation. The importance of practice cannot be overemphasized here. Bob Britton makes that point. So I don't know if you have anything to say about the practice sort of in exchange with or in concert with the other evidence that you were just talking about, Tim?
Well, you know, practice, the problem is observable practice. And the question is the culture in your company. When we work with our customers, so we work with 250 companies a year. We train 30 to 40,000 sellers. We have this concept called fluency coaching, which is an online recorded mission to learn your story, own your story, record yourself telling that story. We build out a rubric, and people must submit, one of our clients calls it fit for duty. And some cultures don't have fit for duty cultures. But what I would tell you is, on average, what we see is, because the analytics in the tool that we use does this, people will practice 6.3 times before hitting the submit button. What I would tell you is that there's a good chance that's 5.3 more times than they usually practice. And so something about observable practice that you need, and you can't observe because they're all off doing their own thing, is you got to force it. And then the idea of observable practice leading to demonstrated proficiency. For heaven's sake, this is the moment. It must be great. Why don't you ask your people to perform a fit for duty, observable practice, demonstrated proficiency exercise? And what I can tell you is they will practice.
Excellent.
End of sermon.
I have to step off the soapbox repeatedly, and I think it's just something we've got to check ourselves on. Any other questions, you guys, for Tim? Still a whole lot of you in this conversation, and it's great to hang out. But you know, if you're not talking and we're not talking, it's just a weird kind of silence. What other questions you guys got for Tim today? Other than thank you so much. Randy, could you repeat your question? You said, see the question about the Q&A section. Let me see if I can dig you up here. Look, Randy's facilitating to me. I love it. Let's see. There is one from Reed, and this goes back to the value wedge, Tim. So I don't know if we can go all the way, you know, in our Wayback Machine all the way there, but do you typically find the value wedge based on internal characteristics, i.e. known advantages over competitors, or do you see more tailoring based on the specific customer's needs through discovery?
So I know this is may sound like an expected answer. It's a both and. So when I think of like sales enablement, working with product marketing and trying to create a 10% for the company in this product or this market segment or this vertical, that's when you're going to do an exercise and identify your value wedge, the known differences. Because unwittingly, sometimes when you try to tailor, you think you're responding to something the company told you, but you don't have a value wedge there. It might put you at parity. Worse yet, you might unwittingly say we have this service and it's something where you're not as good as the competitor. So the risk is in tailoring, yes, the customer said it was a need, but now you responded with something that doesn't make you unique or advantage. So the company, I believe, needs to create their value wedges as necessary and say, these are the hills we plant our flag on. These are the hills we win on. And now I think teaching the skill to your sellers then of being situationally fluent to get into a customer dialogue where they might need to slightly modify some of these things based on like gargantuan needs that the customer said, must talk about this. That I think they should know the tool, the skill, the concept of finding a value wedge, and make sure they live in that idea of it being a value wedge so they don't unwittingly put you at value parity or value deficit.
Excellent. Debbie asks, and this is, I challenge you to keep this answer tight, Tim. What are some great resources for creating memorable presentations?
Well, so Carmen has written a book called Impossible to Ignore, and you might want to check that out. It is heavy. It's like serious science, but it's really not only presentations, but sort of all content. It's really the science of unforgettable content. So in fact, our ebook here is a digest of that book to make it a little more approachable. So you can see down here to the right, I put my little magic wand away. We're going to give you part of that. So think of it as a digested version of a pretty heavy book that you might want to start there. And this webcast, we are turning into a brand new ebook that should be out in a couple weeks to reinforce and refresh the big ideas here. So we now know who your names are. We will promise to send you that when it's done. But that I think is important. I do think that the Chip and Dan Heath made to stick are some awesome concepts. There's just not a lot of great visual premises there. I don't think Nancy Duarte's stuff is too bad. If you haven't seen Duarte Design, they're kind of a competitor of ours, but that just shows you I'm the bigger man. I'm willing to talk about that. She's done some nice work. We like our science a little better, but it's really smart stuff. So that's another good one. So those are some examples.
We got room for one more?
Sure. Yep.
So Randy asked, we found that if they ask questions, so I'm guessing they, the customer, ask questions during a module of the Prezzo, then we may not get through all the material. So any comments about having a Q&A section at the end of a piece of content?
Well, so what you saw me today do was I had it planned for an hour, and I had my content planned in such a way that mentally I knew how much time I could have to kibitz with Bill here and try to keep it on task. So I think it's good to capture the issue in the moment versus have somebody try to remember it until the end. It's not bad to say we're going to get to that. That's okay too. That said, right now I am landing this thing because Bill wanted me to stick around and answer a few more questions. Breaking one of my cardinal rules is don't land on questions because they're not as interesting to everybody. What's interesting is to have a really hot closing. And my hot closing usually is the recap that I did of our Big 10 because our Big 10% because I want you to remember it. And so the thing I loathe about Q&A, I would protect no matter what at all costs, 2 to 5 minutes at the end to bring your 10% back and recap that for everybody because the last thing they remember, the last thing they hear is the first thing they remember, something called primacy and recency, first and last. And so the last being a bunch of Q&A is can sometimes be a little harsh because of the rabbit holes people can take you down, especially if you have somebody who's not good at answering off the cuff questions. So the last thing they remember is like, well, that was sort of bungled. So protect 2 to 5 minutes to bring your 10% back, sear it into their brain as the last thing they heard. So they exit the door with that. And so Bill, as a result, that was the last question. Here's my 10%. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time, Tim. Lots
Take
of
care.
love. This was excellent. Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Take care.